And on the domestic commodities market space, here is Damilola Akimbami, Head of Research at Financial Derivatives Company. Good morning, Dami. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Chimeze.
All right, let's begin from the global oil market. We saw the settlement price trade at negative yesterday. Now, does this have any resemblance to what happens in the financial market where you have some kind of negative returns?
Yes, like any market, whether the commodity market or financial markets, you definitely see negative returns when the sentiment is down, when there's a lot of uncertainty, when the demand-supply imbalance is there. So definitely there's some semblance, and we know that earlier in the year, and even when the COVID pandemic started worsening, we saw that all global stocks were in negative territory. Even Nigeria was not excluded. And like you rightly mentioned, in the oil market, for the first time ever, the U.S. variant of crude, which is the West Texas Intermediate crude, actually fell to negative territory of minus $37 per barrel. And now that has never happened before. And it's just because basically there's no demand right now, because nobody's flying, nobody's driving like that. Even if you're driving, where you're going to go to with all the restrictions that are in place. And more importantly, there's a supply glut, and storage facilities are gradually running out of capacity. So with the oil that is being produced, there's nowhere to store it. So that's what is actually affecting the oil markets now. And we know that the output cut of 9.7 million barrels per day that OPEC and its allies agreed to early in April, it's having little or no effect right now on the market dynamics. So that's what we're seeing right now.
Do you think this might spur up OPEC again to come up with further output cuts?
There are actually talks that they might, what is happening now might actually lead to further cuts. But the thing right now is that how much can you actually cut production? Because it's one thing to actually reduce supply. But again, storage facilities, like I mentioned, the capacity is running out. So right now it's gotten to a point that even oil producers are more like even actually paying for this crude to consumers, actually asking them to buy and whatnot. So that's actually what we're seeing now. So even if supply cuts continue, they have to be deep enough to actually offset it. So I think what will actually change the market dynamics right now would be for a pickup in oil demand. So that means we need to start seeing some recovery in this
now,
COVID
we've seen
issue.
this happening in WTI. Are we likely to see that happen on Brent? I did ask that question to Dr. Fawibe.
Well, Brent is the UK variant crude, and we've also seen Brent soften to as low as $22 per barrel this year. So there's that possibility of it also affecting Brent, and that would have huge implications for Nigeria. And we know that even the June prices, because there's the spot price, there's the future price. The future price for Brent, which is going to expire in June, is about $26 per barrel, while WTI is about 20. And if there's no recovery, if demand doesn't pick up, we actually could see even the future prices for Brent drop below $26 per barrel.
Now, price of oil has come down, revenue has reduced. Does it mean the price of, petrol, which is currently at 123 naira, 50 kobo, will come down further?
Well, there's that possibility, because you're supposed to be flexible. You're supposed to operate in market dynamic equilibrium scenario. And we know that the president has reduced the pump price to that, to as low as 123 naira, 50 kobo. But the thing is, even if you reduce it further, people aren't really going out like that. So even if I buy for, there's the limit to how much I can store in terms of fuel. So the positives definitely are there and all that. But again, the negative impact is more significant on the Nigerian economy.
So what would that mean for the Naira and revenue allocation and, of course, the domestic commodity market?
Yes. So like I mentioned, the negative implications will be significant. We know, okay, for instance, the monthly statutory allocation for April surprisingly increased by 9.1% to about 634 billion naira. And that's actually because of exchange rate gains. So meaning the decline in oil proceeds were not significant enough to actually reduce FAC allocations. But we know that going forward, if oil prices remain low, and there's a possibility that Nigeria may actually cut its production output further to about 1.4 million barrels per day. So definitely fiscal revenues will be affected. Our deficit funding is already increasing. We're close to about 1.4 trillion, going close to about 2 trillion naira right now in terms of deficit funding. And that also could increase. Now, in terms of the external balance, our reserves are at $33.8 billion right now, and there's a possibility it could fall further. We've already adjusted our exchange rate. Right now, the parallel market is about 420 to 430 naira per dollar. And the thing is that it could actually happen, it could worsen. And that means that imported goods and services, because Nigeria depends a lot on imported goods, our imported inflation might increase. Now, linking it to inflation numbers that came out, there was a marginal uptick in March. But in April, which was when actually the lockdowns were in effect, and with the exchange rate adjustment, we might see inflation actually increase further to about 13%.
That's for April?
For April.
Now, this 12.26% in March, did you see that coming?
Well, we actually expected it to be more, to be higher than that, or more significant than that. But from the explanation given by the NBS, the lockdowns were effectively in April. So, and this is March figures. So definitely the uptick was marginal. And also from the breakdown, we can actually see that it was the core inflation that triggered the increase. So you saw an increase in air transportation, we saw an increase in household appliances. So that was actually what triggered that increase. But in April, which is actually what we should be looking at, because it's inflationary expectations and what have you, you are going to definitely see an uptick both in terms of food and in terms of the core inflation.
And are we likely to have food crisis like projected by FAO?
Well, the thing is, Nigeria actually was still in that, we're not yet there in terms of food production, and we're already seeing scarcity and shortages of these goods and commodities. And like I mentioned earlier, we import a lot. So there's that issue, one, because our trade partners, most of them are on lockdown mode. Two, there's the transportation costs. Even if you have the goods, how do you transport it from one area to the other? So there's the price effect. There's also now the income effect. Most people are not working. Salaries are going to be reduced or even cut, or people laid off. So it gets to a point. So
people can't even afford the food.
So it gets to a point that you're no longer reacting to the price effect of higher prices. You're now reacting to your income. If you don't have money to buy, you're not going to buy anything.
Now, the items, or rather the commodities that might probably be affected here, we're talking about flour, we're talking about wheat. I mean, how would all of these impact these commodities and some of the products that come from this commodity?
The impact is going to be significant in the sense that, like I mentioned earlier, that the Naira has been adjusted downwards. And now, so that means that most producers, for instance, the people that produce flour, they're importing their wheat no longer at 360, but maybe at 420, 430. So definitely their costs have increased. So obviously they're going to translate or transfer that cost increase to the consumer in terms of maybe higher prices for finished goods, or maybe even miniaturizing. That means reducing the size of products. So for instance, if the price of wheat has increased, leading to increase in flour, you might see that the price of a loaf of bread increase, or the size actually reduce just to accommodate this price increase. So in other words,
we can rightly say that perhaps hunger may be what will kill Nigerians and not the COVID-19, right?
Well, Nigeria has a lot of issues right now. So even before the pandemic, we had poverty issues, high unemployment. There's a lot of unrest going on right now. So Nigeria actually has its plate full right now, and then a lot of measures and palliatives need to be put in place.
Should we be scared?
Well, we need to be concerned, but I would say that, all hope is not lost.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Damilola Kimami is the head of research, financial derivatives.